welcome to my continued Thunderbolts coverage. This video is actually part of that discussion, and I hope you'll not only like the video, but subscribe so you won't miss any more videos covering Thunderbolts, from spoiler coverage to the how it does at the box office this coming weekend. So yes, Hollywood has a problem with female characters in genre content. I don't know if you've noticed. From Star Wars to DC to now even Marvel, they're all dealing with this. And I think the real issue is that Hollywood doesn't understand female genre characters in their source material, where they originated. They are only looking at the female character herself and not considering the fans and why the fans like the character so much in the first place. This is exacerbated by Hollywood handing these female characters over to producers, writers, directors, and even executives who have never consumed the source material in the first place, nor have any interest in consuming or studying it once they're hired to bring these female characters to life in any of these franchises, which is a weird thing. You would think you'd do your research, although we heard that in some cases they're told not to do their research. Why? It's so funny because, of course, Kevin Feige has, famously, they didn't want Hugh Jackman to read any comics when he was cast as Wolverine, and Kevin Feige was slipping him Wolverine comics, and that turned out great. So these creatives in Hollywood make the mistaken assumption that these female characters appeal primarily to female fans. Incorrect. It's, I can understand where they would get that, where they would make that connection, but they're wrong. And I'm surprised they haven't figured out yet that they're so horribly wrong. I think that's another problem that Hollywood has. They're always so quick to they often don't like the delivery of the message, and therefore they don't pay attention to the message itself. Now, I want to be clear that female and LGBTQ fans are extremely important for female characters as well, particularly if you want female characters to be super popular, if you want them to go supernova. You can't do that without female and LGBTQ fans as part of the mix. Those two groups are a vital component. But what makes female characters in the genre space successful overall is if they appeal to straight male fans in addition. They have to appeal to all three groups. And because it's been proven again and again that the largest consumers of genre content across all platforms are men, from comics to video games to movies. You might not like what I'm saying, but that doesn't make it any less true. For instance, women, it's been proven, are primarily interested in books and television. Now, there are always exceptions to every rule, but you'll notice for the movies that do appeal to women, that do very well, they're often based on what were originally popular books, and that's what gets women to finally come out in force to the multiplex. Take a look at the Marvels, made for women by women, and yet women did not show up at all. They didn't even give it a try. And not that many people did, but of the people who did show up, it was overwhelmingly dudes. So in honor of Thunderbolts, which has the latest Marvel movie with a female hero and a female villain, I hope it does well. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the top 5 female characters that the MCU is getting right, as well as the top 5 female characters that the MCU is getting wrong. Let's start with the top 5 best female characters in the MCU. These are the ones that Kevin Feige is, getting just right. And just like with many of the male characters in the MCU, he's able to make fans or moviegoers really gravitate towards characters that were not particularly popular ever in the comics. But we're focusing on the positive. All right, so number 5, I'm very curious to see how our lists compare. Number 5, Mantis. Gamora was supposed to be the female lead in Guardians of the Galaxy, but over the course of several adventures, James Gunn not only never really addressed or realized her reputation as the greatest warrior in the galaxy, which annoyed a lot of us, but 2 other supporting female characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy world stepped up in a big way. I almost put Nebula on this list, in fact. I'm a big Nebula fan. I love Nebula. Her storyline in Avengers Endgame remains one of the greatest adventures for a female character or any character in the MCU to date. But Mantis? With the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, this character has truly become the heart of the team. I think at this point, Nebula has earned a break. So Mantis, though, I feel her story is just getting started, and that's why I wanted to include her on this list. Maybe one of the things that benefits Mantis in the MCU is that while Gamora and Nebula are both pretty serious, Mantis is a lighter character and perhaps a better fit with Gunn's style of writing. Gunn's writing, paired with Pom Clementieff's delivery, has allowed Mantis to hold her own opposite the likes of Chris Pratt and Dave Bautista, huge comedic personalities. Being an alien, her fish-out-of-water antics are just as much fun as Drax's, which is probably why they were drawn together. But also their friendship and maybe romance? I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on between the two of them, but that has been a great and wonderful surprise. Perhaps Mantis's greatest power, well, she's brutally honest, which I think is also a lot of fun. But even when she's being brutally honest, she's always positive. She truly has the power of positivity. And that makes her a lot of fun to have around, even though she doesn't have particularly flashy powers. I definitely think that fans would be happy to see Mantis again sooner rather than later in the MCU. Number 4, Shuri. Now, a lot of straight male fans were understandably, let's say, frustrated when T'Challa wasn't recast immediately after Chadwick Boseman's tragic passing. But be patient. A new T'Challa is coming. In the meantime, come on. Shuri taking over her brother's mantle as Black Panther is canon. It's from the comics. It definitely would have had to happen at some point. And it's great that the MCU not only told this story, but unlike some of their other adaptations, they didn't rush or butcher it. It's in fact really well done. Thank you, Ryan Coogler. He's so good. At a time when many female-led genre projects are faltering, Shuri led her own movie to over 800 million worldwide. And it did well, not just domestically, but internationally as well. A success that can sometimes elude Hollywood movies with diverse leads. Letitia Wright's Shuri is a scientist, a fighter, but also a sister and a daughter. Her perseverance over grief, as depicted in Wakanda Forever, all while having to step up in a way that Shuri never imagined she would have to, is an incredible story. Plus, she looks amazing in her suit, which not only honors the legacy of the Black Panther mantle, but is also very much her own. Like her brother, like a good leader, she shows mercy to her enemies, always thinking of the bigger picture, the long game, and what's best for her people instead of for her. And while the crown was heavy and isolating for T'Challa, Shuri was one of his closest connections. Their bond was beautiful. Shuri herself has a very strong support group, with Ryan Coogler showing once more with the sequel that one of Wakanda's true strengths is its women. But Shuri not only represents those women, but works to lift them up individually so they can stand also on their own. All right, number 3, Sue Storm. We haven't even officially met her yet, but already the Invisible Woman is anything but. Invisibility, so the superpower you would give a woman in the 1960s. It was the times. It was the times. And even in a lot of the more recent comics, Sue is largely defined by her relationships to the male characters around her instead of her own goals and dreams. But director Matt Shakman, I'm just saying what's true. But this is a delicate conversation. But if we don't have it, it'll never get better. So director Matt Shakman has made it clear that a top priority for the MCU version of Sue Storm is to give her more personal agency. And she's going to be the leader of the Future Foundation. But they're still clearly going to focus on her role on the team as the sister, wife, and mother. That's very interesting. I think just hear me out. It's actually getting me a little bit more excited for the movie. So there's a lot of talk these days about trad wives, right? Traditional wives. But that discussion is often from the male perspective, even when women are discussing trad wives. But which just goes to show you that often that discussion is still aimed at guys to appeal to them. But a real trad wife is in charge of the home and the family. She is the glue that keeps it all together. It is her responsibility. That's the way trad wife is supposed to work. That's the only way it was, there are other factors, but that's one of the ways it was originally able to be sold. But even that was something that very rarely actually still held in real life. But to see Sue Storm navigate that as a superhero with the superhero family could be very interesting. Because even some feminists today still choose to be stay-at-home wives and mothers. And so I think this is going to be very much from that perspective. I mean, Sue Storm is lucky in that her offices are home with the Fantastic Four, but I still think this could be really interesting. A superhero trad wife from a genuinely female perspective and showing what that really entails, and not just the responsibility, but also the sacrifice, the personal sacrifice. I think a lot of women can identify with the personal sacrifice of self. This could really be cooking. Also, over the years, the Invisible Woman has become less about making herself invisible and more about being surprisingly powerful, because you don't see her constructs, her invisible constructs, until it's too late. Some fans are arguably, and understandably, nervous about some, it used to be that Sue Storm would always faint from her powers. That's a very old school version of superhero women. And so hopefully there's not any fainting, or it's only in really extreme circumstances. But yes, these days in the comics, Sue Storm does not faint. She is one of the most powerful characters, male or female, in the entire Marvel Comics universe. And a lot of fans are hoping that that will carry over immediately to the MCU. I like this. Can Sue Storm be mother and mother at the same time? Can she be both? If she can, she could be a really big hit. All right, the number 3, Yelena Belova, who has a little movie coming out this weekend. You might want to check it out. I'm just saying. I hope it's more than little. I enjoyed this movie, particularly because of Yelena Belova. After a decade of successful storytelling with the MCU and keeping the same actors for all that time, and then choosing to kill off characters rather than recast, and then you, of course, have Hugh Jackman, who's been Wolverine for 25 years at this point, till he's 90, Hollywood has become worried that now maybe they can't recast fan favorite characters while that actor is still around. So it's, I think, encouraging for the future of franchises that Marvel's been able to, they didn't recast Black Widow, but they were able to pass the baton successfully from Scarlett Johansson to Florence Pugh. We'll have to see how Thunderbolts does at the box office, but from a fan perspective, they are already loving Yelena, myself included, from not only the first Black Widow movie where she was a highlight, to Hawkeye, also a highlight, and now she's front and center for the Thunderbolts movie. And Pugh is a respected actress, so I think that's helping with the critics as well. How can a female character with so few powers be so popular? Well, first off, everyone loves a sexy woman in a black leather who's armed to the teeth. Just ask Sarah Connor, Lara Croft, Alice, and many more. But also, never underestimate personality and style, two things that Yelena Belova particularly has in abundance. The braids! Oh, I miss the braids. Remember how the braids got cooler and cooler throughout Hawkeye, all of her appearances? Those were great. But I like the eyeliner that she's brought to Thunderbolts. And where is the crossover with like Sephora or something, or Ulta? All right, and unlike Natasha, Pugh's Yelena even has a thick Russian accent, which she can use for both comedic and dramatic effect, but also, I think, better ties her to her comic book origins and the Russian Red Room. Both Black Widows were vital parts of their teams, able to hold their own next to the big guns, but also providing emotional support. It's interesting, Natasha was very much Steve's number 2, helping him with some difficult things that he had to do. She was really so supportive of him. But now we're seeing Yelena in the Steve role. She's the leader. She's the one going down the dark path herself. And I think that's a really fantastic evolution. Again, here's hoping it makes some money at the box office. So I think we all know who the most popular character is in the MCU. You have a moment to answer down below, and I think we're all on the same page. Number 1, Wanda Maximoff. Wanda, aka, of course, the Scarlet Witch, which never really uses that. I think because it comes across I think she hasn't claimed that in her power. Why do you think that is? I never thought about that. I didn't even put it in my notes, but it just occurred to me. I think Wanda feels like you're on her side, and Scarlet Witch feels like people call her when they're being a jerk. They don't understand her. Of course, witch is a very loaded word when it comes to women, although I think Agatha all along did a lot to reclaim that word, And Agatha Harkness, by the way, I would include her in this category as well, because that show proved that the witch corner of the MCU can be exciting even without Wanda in it at the moment, although her shadow, of course, still is significantly hovering over it, with both her frenemy and son center stage. But that's right, Wanda, thanks to Jack Schaefer, has carved out her own corner of the MCU. Other characters have as well, but I don't think to the degree that Wanda has. And even with the horrible writing, thanks to a writer and director who couldn't be bothered. I mean, I know that the show wasn't complete at that point, but they could have read the scripts for WandaVision. But even though they treated that character so poorly, Wanda, I think, still is responsible for propelling Doctor Strange 2 to close to $1 billion. That kind of worked in a way, though, because I think for those of us, particularly the female and LGBTQ fans, we could relate to how Wanda was being vilified. And that's what the movie was about. It just became on, a meta level. So where is Elizabeth Olsen? Why does Kevin Feige still have her on the bench? Why is she still throwing shade at Marvel in interviews? That messy drama, I think, just makes her even more popular. So remember how I said that female and LGBTQ fans were vital to supercharging the popularity of a female character? Well, we love nobody more than Wanda. Wanda! And you can see both groups very much reflected in her corner of the MCU. And by the way, particularly female and LGBTQ fans, the success of Agatha all along and keeping that budget low, but that was very much thanks to these groups. But I want to be fair, straight male fans, they also love Wanda, right? Thanks to how powerful she is, her rich comic book history. She herself didn't have a lot of personal development in the comics, but she was involved in a lot of important moments and storylines. And also how great, respectfully, Elizabeth Olsen looks in her costumes. And that's another great thing. I told you when I saw Multiverse of Madness, there were two college-age guys sitting behind me who I believe were straight. And they were talking about, they were like, boy, she looks great in that costume. Sexy. And they were like, but still respectable. I think that's a really good balance of appeal. Wanda has it all. Also, fascinatingly, while Sue Storm is mother, Wanda is that crazy hot bitch, right? And both of those terms have meaning and appeal to not only female and LGBTQ fans, but also straight male fans. And they're very contrary reason that they both have such contrary definitions of those terms. But I think that's fascinating. I think that's so fascinating to me. And that's why I think there's enormous potential for Sue Storm before she even arrives. And I guess we'll see. We'll see if, I wish Jack Schaefer was consulted on Invisible Woman. Anyway, we haven't seen Wanda now for 3 years, 3 freaking years. Fans, we were just happy to see the back of her dead body in Agatha all along. But when she does come back, if she comes back, but when she does, I think it's going to be big. It's going to be a really big deal. All right, now let's switch over to the top 5 MCU female characters that Kevin Feige has royally screwed up. Sorry, but it's true. All right, number 5, Taskmaster. Comics have been around for a very long time, and in their early days, when a lot of today's popular and even only semi-popular characters were established, not a lot of diversity across the board in every conceivable way. So Hollywood thought they could have a shortcut by race bending and gender bending some of these characters. And for the most part, it hasn't really worked out. Taskmaster is a deep cut of a character, but he does have a very potent niche fan base. And they were not too happy when they found out that he had been gender bent for the Black Widow movie. The original Taskmaster doesn't even have anything to do with Black Widow as a guy or the Red Room. This was just such a big change to the character. Taskmaster did have some cool action sequences in the Black Widow movie, but it was a real bummer and stupid when it was revealed that this female character had a male stunt double who was doing those action sequences, which totally defeats the purpose of gender bending the character. Also, to be perfectly honest, Taskmaster's ability to mimic another character's fighting skills, Taskmaster is supposedly in the comics at least able to mimic other things as well, like any skill. But in the MCU, they really focused on fighting styles. But it's kind of hard to depict in live action. They occasionally would cut to another superhero and be like, that's who they're... the Black Panther was the most obvious. But everything else, you were like, who is that supposed to be again? It kind of worked when she was a mirror image for Natasha in some of the sequences, but it doesn't really work in live action. And by the way, I don't even think it really works in the comics, to be honest with you. Why does Taskmaster have a small but potent fan base? As I said, personality and style. It matters for male characters as well. But the MCU version of Taskmaster did not have personality or style. Well, actually, Taskmaster's redesign for the Thunderbolts movie is kind of amazing. And now that it's no longer supposed to be a big surprise that it's a woman, the outfit now is more feminine and sleek. Too bad she's hardly in the movie. In fact, Marvel paid to edit her out of later scenes. So do you know how expensive that is, right? Like Olga Kurylenko, what did you do? Anyway, this character is already a mess in the MCU, a sloppy mess and wasted potential as a male or a female character. Because that really was a cool new suit. Number 4, Gaia. Yikes. Ooh, so bad. That's right, and this is only number 4. So I would say that Gaia is a perfect visual metaphor of how badly Kevin Feige messed up the Secret Invasion adaptation. Just, if you want to see, I mean, this was one of the greatest comic book crossover events of all time. And this is how it turned out. I mean, it's probably, I would say, the worst Disney Plus show to date. What's largely viewed to be a race to the bottom. She's not even the Skrull Queen from the original story in the comics. Gaia wasn't even in the original story. Now, there is a Gaia introduced in the 2019 comic, which was probably to, cover their tracks as they got ready to make the series. They're like, well, we can point to one in the comics and maybe make people a little more excited to read this comic because they know it might be related to the show. It wasn't. But so fans were like, who the heck is this? And why is this show focusing on her? This isn't Secret Invasion. But unfortunately, it was. Then not only does she become ridiculously overpowered, but the powers don't even look cool when she's using them. Well, the Captain Marvel powers look pretty cool. But I can't even say that much about Gaia because we never really learned anything about her except she was super mean to her dad. And how do you be mean to Ben Mendelsohn? I mean, so yeah, basically the Game of Thrones curse continues. Number 3, the Wasp. Both of them, another total waste. Remember, the Wasp was the first leader of the Avengers in the comics. She was chosen to lead by all of her fellow male teammates. That's a pretty big deal. But yet, look at what has happened to the character in the MCU. First, the MCU decided to go with the second generation version of Ant-Man, Scott Lang over Hank Pym. So that meant they had to invent a new contemporary Wasp to go along with Scott Lang, which led to the creation of Hope Van Dyne, Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne's daughter. There's this complicated backstory about how she's upset with her dad, so she took her mom's name. And you're like, what? All right, so she had a super cool bob and a very nice red lip, by the way, but she wasn't actually the Wasp for the entire first movie. She got the suit in a cool post-credit sequence, which was adorable and looked very comics accurate. But the MCU can't make that. They're like, cute little gloves, forget it. We can't do that. It's got to look like everybody else's generic costume. But also, Hope had a wet blanket personality. So even in the second movie, where she rocked a ponytail and finally became the Wasp, even if it wasn't a generic suit, she was still a wet blanket. She was always basically like telling everybody to clean up their toys. It was really annoying. Then it certainly didn't help that actress Evangeline Lilly decided to go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole in real life and tell everybody about it. Fans were pretty excited when Michelle Pfeiffer of Catwoman fame was cast as the original Janet Van Dyne. That was so exciting. And even more exciting when she actually got some action in Quantumania. In more ways than one, if you might remember that storyline. What's going on over there, Marvel? But still, these are just generic wife-girlfriend characters. And that's a real shame because the Wasp has had some incredible storylines in the comics. From balancing her superhero life with being a successful businesswoman as a fashion designer. She designed a lot of the costumes in the comics. If everyone's going to have the same costume, oh yeah, that's right. Why did they have them at least be from Hope Van Dyne and give her that? And that would explain why they all look the same. To also, I don't know, they kind of touched on Tony Stark's alcoholism, but in the comics, Janet Van Dyne had a physically abusive relationship with Hank Pym. And then also on a lighter note, we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, the second movie, that she could be very cool in action sequences. And, they just didn't use it. Again, what a waste. Number 2, She-Hulk. Again, what a shame. She-Hulk is a really fun character, and Tatiana Maslany was exceptionally well cast, both as Jennifer Walters and through the VFX as She-Hulk. She looks perfect. She's so comics accurate. And they even kept She-Hulk being fun and flirty, as she has been in the comics. Wow. To me, she seems like she just leapt off of the comic book page. But the show got off to a really bad start when it had Jennifer minimize the suffering that her cousin Bruce had gone through himself. You don't belittle someone else to build yourself up. And male fans, I think understandably, took that really badly and and it just soured the entire rest of the show for them. And that's the fault of Rick and Morty writer Jessica Gao, Rick and Morty writers, who was the showrunner on She-Hulk. To be fair, though, Gao did have some really good ideas, from the flirty aspects that she kept for She-Hulk to also including her history of breaking the fourth wall. I don't love how it totally went down. I thought it was cool when she climbed through the Disney Plus app. That was just perfect. That was so She-Hulk. At that point, though, a lot of the straight male fans were just like so upset. But why were they still watching? They were hate watching, I guess. All right, to including other fun and flirty female characters on the show. I think the Megan Thee Stallion cameo was fun, but again, the show had just been tainted at that point. And then also Madison. How can you not at least partially love a show that gave us Madison? Also, some male fans didn't like seeing She-Hulk hook up with Daredevil, even though they're not only both lawyers, but let's just say super flirty, not only on their respective shows, but in the comics as well. I mean, they both get around. But I think that sort of shows the double standard between how men and women are viewed in those situations. Another huge problem was that Gao's Jennifer Walters didn't even want to be a superhero. She didn't want to be here. So why would fans want to have her here? That was really a mistake also from a writing perspective. I would not bring Gao back. I think she did incredible damage to the character. But I don't think that means Tatiana Maslany has to leave. Again, her She-Hulk is incredible, and She-Hulk has not only been a member of the Avengers, but of the Fantastic Four. She is a crucial character, male or female, in the Marvel landscape. And again, she looks phenomenal. Let's just get her better writing. Okay, then finally, the female character that has been handled the absolute worst by the MCU is Captain Marvel, #1. Although I wouldn't totally blame just the MCU. I think Brie Larson has a little culpability here as well. For instance, right after she debuted as Captain Marvel in a billion-dollar movie, she was going around saying she really wanted to be in Star Wars. And you're like, what? Pick a lane. Focus on making this character work before you want to jump to another franchise. All right, so did you notice, by the way, that for most of the worst characters, I listed their superhero names over their regular person names, right? Made up names versus real names, as Peter Parker would say. At first, I thought it was maybe because we hadn't connected to these characters that aren't working beyond their powers. But it also occurred to me that with the other characters, I have to use their regular names because they're not the first character to bear the mantle that they have. So I need to be able to distinguish which version of that character I'm talking about. But Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, the Wasp, these were powerful female characters from the start. They originated that way and have become as famous, as well-known as Captain America, Iron Man, etc. So that their MCU versions are not working out, that's just a damn tragedy. It's just the name recognition. It's really frustrating. The first Captain Marvel movie, as I said, made $1 billion, not just because it came out between the two Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp came out between them as well, did not make $1 billion. But also because fans were expecting this to lay the groundwork for Secret Invasion, which again, as I told you, was one of the best storylines ever in recent memory. And it kind of did. It laid the groundwork for that crappy Disney Plus show. But it's a real shame that Kevin Feige robbed Carol Danvers of that storyline for her second film, instead giving her a glorified Disney Plus movie, The Marvels, which was cute, but it was not what a Secret Invasion movie could have been. Secret Invasion should have been a multi-movie. It should have been like a two-parter, like Infinity War and Endgame, and what's going to hopefully be Doomsday and Secret Wars. That should have been Secret Invasion. Also, I gotta tell ya, Captain Marvel, while extremely powerful, has never been that popular in the comics. I mean, she's gotten a lot of headlines over the past few years because they've reinvented the character several times, but the fact that they need to keep reinventing the character because each reinvention eventually peters out and doesn't sell enough comics should tell you a lot right there. And remember, I just told you, I've been telling you through this whole video that style and personality are important. Well, Carol's never had much of either. That faux hawk, that was some style, and that got her a lot of attention. But I think one of the things that's defined her the most in the comics over the past few years, like for instance, they tried to do another Civil War. They were like, Civil War 2, and they were like, who was it? Tony versus Carol, I think. But nobody cared, because nobody wanted to be on Carol's side, you know? And she did some bad stuff, I gotta tell you. But, you know, she's kind of had like really focused on her female friendships, which is nice. And that kind of what's touched on in the Marvels movie. But, you know, again, I mean, how are you going to appeal to a straight male audience with that kind of a story? You know, you have to have some strong male characters in there, which is something the first Wonder Woman and Barbie did very successfully. All right, so anyway, and while Kevin Feige has been able to make some characters in the MCU work, even though they didn't in the comics, this hasn't been one of them. Many of us knew that this would be an issue as soon as they said they were going to bring Captain Marvel into the MCU. And a lot of us felt the solution would be bringing in an actress who already had a lot of personality, who was already very well defined. And we all wanted Charlize Theron. She would have been fantastic, but Hollywood and its ageism. Instead, Hollywood and the MCU decided to go with a younger actress who could conceivably be in more films for a longer period of time. But how'd that work out? After the Marvels flopped, there was no chair for Captain Marvel in the Doomsday promo. And the MCU did eventually bring in Charlize Theron as Clea for a post-credit scene in Doctor Strange 2, although who knows where the heck she is now. So anyway, that's my list of the top 5 best and the top 5 worst female characters currently in the MCU. Hopefully they do some work on the bad list. So I'm excited to hear your own lists down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.